People always want welfare, development, good governance and democracy. As long as you are delivering, people are with you. Good evening and welcome. This is Face the Nation. Our topic of discussion today is the online safety bill. Here we go again. Joining us this evening to discuss all this and more, we've invited four eminent personalities to the studios this evening as well. Joining us this evening on the show are Professor Rohan Samarjeeva, Chair of Learn Asia; Salia Peris, President's Council, former President of the Bar Association of Sri Lanka; Attorney at Law Tisha Veeragoda, as well as Dr. Rohan Tatukorala, Country Head, Cool Track Software Labs, Sri Lanka, Maldives and Pakistan. You too can join in as far as the conversation is concerned. The number to WhatsApp your messages is 076 656 5353. The number once again, 076 656 5353. Joining me to pose questions from our panelists this evening is Niresh Lethambi, Consultant English News Director at Newsfirst. So let's get the ball rolling today with Professor Rohan Samarjeeva, Chair of Learn Asia. What is your thinking with regard to the online safety bill, which will be tabled in Parliament on the 23rd of January?
This bill doesn't address, I accept that there are problems with online content. This bill does not address those problems. It's fixated on punishing when the focus should be on prevention and deterrence. And it also, with the changes that have been made, the extraordinary large number of amendments that have been put in, the process is now going to take longer. That means that the harm is going to be aggravated. So what is new about new media? What is new about new media is something called viral dissemination. That's, I think, the key, which is if a online publication is made, it can be shared by others. And even if the original publication is withdrawn, those other messages will keep going. I think this was well illustrated with one of the most heinous crimes that happened in recent times, the Christchurch massacre in the mosque, where you had the live streaming of the killing. And even when Facebook managed to take that down, the people who had shared it just kept sharing and it kept going. We call it viral dissemination. Now, a harmed person by a message, what they want is for the message to be taken down. What we want is the fastest possible takedown. Now, with this bill, particularly with the changes that the Attorney General has proposed and that is mentioned in the Supreme Court determination, it's going to take longer. So it'll never be a quick takedown. What you're going to have is a week, 2 weeks, depending on the volume that's coming in. It's going to take a long time. And for that whole period, especially because the message may have originated from a foreign location. If it's a truly malicious message, it's quite possible that it has been posted by a person outside Sri Lankan jurisdiction. So with all these complications, what we have is a wrong solution that aggravates the problem that really exists. So in my view, this bill cannot be fixed. The Attorney General can't fix it. The Supreme Court can't fix it. I don't think anyone can fix it. It's beyond repair. It should be withdrawn and they should start again, because the original problem is a technological problem and the solution for that is a technological solution, not a punishment-centric solution that the law is trying to present.
Professor Samarjeeva, when you look at the bill in question, why is it so dangerous coming into Parliament on the 23rd of January, this being an election year for the general public?
Well, I mean, there is, if you want to, I can only reason from analogy. Before the Malaysian election of 2018, I believe, when former Prime Minister Najib, who is currently serving a prison term, just before the election, he pushed through a law like this. Not only was the law approved, but there was a big advertising campaign in public transport and on hoardings. They even had a test case. That is, they arrested some fellow who said that an ambulance had taken 45 minutes to come instead of 14 minutes that it actually took. And since that fellow couldn't pay the fine, he was fined, they threw him in jail. So the whole point was to demonstrate that before the election that you had to be very, very, very careful about online communication. Now, of course, did that work? He lost the election. Not only did he lose the election, but the particular controversy that was, I suppose, at the root of it, the one MDB scandal where billions of dollars were pilfered, has actually landed him and his wife in jail. So I don't know whether there are any parallels there. I mean, I'm just saying what happened in another country, because that's the only way I can sort of put the pieces together.
Thank you very much, Professor Rohan Samarjee, Chair of Learn Asia. I now move my attention towards President's Counsel Salya Peiris, former President of the Bar Association of Sri Lanka. What are your thoughts on the bill?
Well, how I see it is that this bill is part of a larger attack on the freedom to dissent. And when you see the manner in which this bill, and not only this bill, but the other bills such as the anti-terrorism bill, they have been drafted in secrecy, minimum or no consultation process, then they're presented in Parliament. Of course, some parties do challenge it in court, but we know that the Supreme Court will look at a bill for constitutionality, not necessarily whether the bill is good or bad. And we know that the scrutiny of that the bill is in that sense limited. So I see this as a broader attack on democracy. And this is why we must be more concerned, not only the online safety bill, the anti-terror bill, the conduct of the police, the repressive tactics, which are sometimes encouraged by people such as the Minister of Public Security. All those have to be taken into account. And I think that as citizens, we must be concerned. And I do think that, especially on the online safety bill, that the corporate sector, those in the IT industry, should be concerned. And it is, for us, it is concerning to see the corporate sector being very silent on this and being on the back foot.
Salya, just because the Supreme Court determines that the bill in question which was presented to them was consistent with the Constitution, that does not necessarily mean that this is not a blockage towards democracy.
Yes, of course, one thing is the Supreme Court in this case, the Supreme Court did not determine the bill in its entirety to be consistent with the Constitution.
They said 31
there were clauses the Supreme Court said.
Amended.
Of course, there were those who argued that the entire bill should be considered as inconsistent with the Constitution, as was done in the Broadcasting Authority bill. But of course, that was not the view of the three judges who heard, who determined on this bill. But one thing we must understand is, some bills pass muster before a bench of the Supreme Court. That does not make it a good bill. The classic example to this is the 18th Amendment to the Constitution. A 5-judge bench of the Supreme Court held that the bill could be, 18th Amendment could be passed by a 2/3 majority. Now, did that make it a good law? No. We saw how it ultimately worked out. And it ultimately ended with the judge who presided over that determination, Justice Shirani Bandaranaike, being arbitrarily impeached from office. So this is where we must understand the role which the Supreme Court plays is limited. And just because it passes muster does not mean everything is all right.
You said, Salya, that this shows the manner in which how democracy is being repressed right now. What do you mean by that?
So we see a whole lot of matters. We see this bill, the anti-terror bill, the conduct of the police, the manner in which people's rights are suppressed, the manner in which elections have been withheld. We saw the president going to parliament and saying that there will be no election because there is no money. Even if there was money, there will be no election, referring to the local authority elections. So I see this as a pattern of suppressing opposition, suppressing dissent. And of course, we see how protesters are dealt with. Sometimes you have 2 protesters walking on the road and about 100 policemen following them. And so that these cause a chilling effect, or an attempt to cause a chilling effect on the public.
Thank you very much, Salih Peris, President's Council, former President of the Bar Association of Sri Lanka. I now move my attention towards Dr. Rohan Tatukorala, country head, Cool Track Software Lab, Sri Lanka, Maldives and Pakistan. Dr. Rohan, I want to pose a question to you to get some direction. Salih has said that the corporate sector is silent and he does not understand why. Do you care to respond to that?
Samir, thank you very much for this invite. And see, what has right now happened is that you have the costs that have increased by almost 3 times. And you have the consumer demand shrinking. So in this backdrop, what the corporate sector is focusing on is how to keep their top line going and keeping their consumers at bay. I mean, that's the challenge right now the corporate sector is having. And if you look at the budget in terms of the kind of VAT that has been imposed and the spiral effect it's happening, you already have almost 73% of consumers saying, as per the Nielsen study, that they're only having 2 meals per day. And with the dairy prices also going up from 0 to 100 on the VAT, you have the prices of milk powder and the rice going up, which is going to have a huge impact on the economy. Currently, we have 7 million people who are in poverty. And post the VAT going up, the speculation that it will hit 10 million. So there are so many in-house challenges that is being right now faced. Right now, maybe that would be one reason why the corporate sector is focused. But if you take a broader view, Samir, I think what's important is that if you look at as to what happened last 15 years, the reason why this economy has shrunk and we had this huge battle in our hand is because of a policy decision that was taken somewhere around in the 2008, where people said that we are going to look at a homegrown economy, we are not going to look at export economy. And then, of course, you had the huge budget deficit that started looming in, and you have a situation where ultimately we don't have forex to pay our debt. Now, what is important right now, Samir, is a discussion happening at the corporate sector, at the people end, and asking how are we going to drive economy? If the IT sector is saying it's $1.7 billion, how do we make this 5 billion? How is it that you're going to have 2 huge unicorns to be appeared? Now, if you're not going to allow people to take part in this discussion, what happens is that we are not allowing the people to come out with ideas.
So Rhonda, when the online safety bill is being discussed now, when we are saying that the bill is going to be tabled in Parliament on the 23rd of January, we expected the social media platforms to at least issue a statement, show their dissent, show the way in which how other countries are adopting their policies, but we didn't see any of that made by like social media giants. Yes, yeah, no, but I mean directly.
TikTok was here, Google was here. They have made face-to-face presentation.
No, I mean the opposition have they made it public?
This is a public document.
Right.
The AIC document, Asian Internet Coalition document, is public. I don't have any contraband with me.
But the point you're saying, Samir, is valid in the sense that the question is.
Well, we just saw recently the manner in which Dr. Harsh De Silva, SJB parliamentarian, saying that it's going to impact social media networks overall. So how do you view this?
See, the question is that people have made representations to the government But as we all know, there's been no proper community consultation per se. I mean, for instance, if you take Pakistan, when Pakistan in 2020, I think, or 21, when they were trying to introduce this whole thing of where every single platform had to register themselves, and then if there was any kind of misinterpretations of data, especially with regard to corruption and harassment, you had a situation where they said the onus is on the platform provider, and there was some very colossal reprimand that you will have if you're not going to act on it. Now, at that moment of time, all the platform providers got together and said, we are going to pull out of Pakistan. And you're talking about Sri Lanka's population is about 20 million, of which I think about 10 million.
Will that happen in Sri Lanka as well?
Well, in a market which has 70 million people on digital platforms, vis-a-vis our 7.5 to 8 million people, if the platform providers said they're going to pull out, I mean, it's going to happen in Sri Lanka also, because there's a case in point in Pakistan, which happened not only like 15 years back. And we know that if you look at the other countries that have used this kind of online bill, they have had discussions for 7-8 years. And they have discussed at different levels, like for example UK, and then only it went to the House of Commons, it went to the lower house, then it went, it's right now at the state of where the King of England has to sign it off. But 7 years of discussion. So you don't have a situation where, within 5 months, a bill is being represented and they are asking people to come and adhere to it. And I think a larger proposition that we need to ask ourselves is, what we right now need is community discussion on whom are we going to vote for.
Right.
And people must have their free will to make meaningful decisions. And it's at this moment of time, when you have that free thought being curtailed, you are actually depriving a proper selection of a candidate.
Thanks, Dr. Rohanda. Professor Samanjiva, the statement that was issued by the Asia Internet Coalition, which includes Google, Meta, Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, Threads, Amazon, Apple, Booking.com, Expedia, Goto, Grab, Line, LinkedIn, so on and so forth. The statement was issued on October 2nd, 2023.
There's another one, 7th of January. The one that I'm holding in my hand was from the 7th of January. This was after face-to-face meetings with the secretary of the ministry. And I think most people don't like sort of crude threats. So this is very diplomatically worded, but it says certain things like registration. If we were required to register, it would be impractical, infeasible, not feasible, and so on.
Right.
It says that the turnaround time of 24 hours to respond is impractical. It just doesn't work. So I personally like this style of communication rather than bring some sledgehammer and say, you governments, we are going to boycott you, we are going to get out of this place. I mean, we must be able to read this language and say, because I think the bottom line here, now for example, why they're talking about the 24-hour turnaround as being a problem is because all these guys have, they are big companies with small number of employees, but they got their legal teams. And the legal teams have to do reviews. Now, if you think that a legal team can do reviews in 24 hours, or for multiple requests that are coming from a small market like ours, they're saying, it doesn't make any sense.
Right.
It doesn't make sense to dedicate large numbers of legal personnel to deal with your country. We might as well just, forget about your market, is sort of what is being said. Right?
So, Attorney at Law Tisha, what are your thoughts on the bill? Now, a lot of people say that this bill is very much like the online safety bill which was introduced by the Singapore government just a couple of years ago. Do you see any similarities?
What I believe is that the law that was originally proposed in Singapore, not the one that was finally enacted, has been the baseline or the blueprint for this particular document. In fact, the then Minister of Justice, Mr. Ali Sabri, went on record saying that they want to enact a law which is much like the prevention of online falsehoods law in Singapore and Malaysia. And I remember he got the name wrong, and I was laughing, thinking that, well, if this law was in place, he would be committing an offense himself. Because that was a misstatement.
Yeah.
But you know, ultimately what was circulated amongst a select crowd was part of that bill, part of that law that was proposed in Singapore. And then what happened was, somebody in our Justice Ministry took it and ran away with it. And we landed with this law. If you look at how it has been drafted, the original version that was circulated a few months ago had words like competent authority. But the online safety bill that was presented to Parliament, tabled in Parliament, instead of the word competent authority, has the word commission. Now you can sugarcoat it as much as you want, but what the role is the very same thing, being a competent authority. So what we must understand is our courts and the general public don't like words such as competent authority because it's very control-oriented or authoritarian. So to get over that hurdle, you sugarcoat it. You put words like the Online Safety Commission. That's what the bill says. And who was to appoint the Online Safety Commission? His Excellency the President. But then what happened? When the bill was challenged in the Supreme Court, the Attorney General comes and says, we will propose an amendment to this. President will not appoint. It will be subject to the Constitutional Council's recommendation. So you see, this is not a bartering system. What we must understand is that a legislative process is not barter. It has to be consultative. The public must be aware of what's going on. Before presenting it to Parliament, the Cabinet of Ministers approve it. The Honourable Attorney General is supposed to say that, yes, this is constitutional. You pass all those stages, come to the Supreme Court when it's challenged. The last chance the general public gets to challenge a law, something before it becomes law. And then they say, sorry, hang on, we must tinker it a little bit more. That's what happened. There was so much of tinkering, nobody was quite sure what the final version of the bill that was presented to, in the bill that was tabled in Parliament and what was discussed in the Supreme Court, they didn't look alike in certain aspects. For example, clause 25. Basically, the Attorney General came and said, yes, we understand there is a problem, we will withdraw it. In fact, the Honourable Attorney General tendered to court what is called an amended draft.
And that is not in the public domain?
It's not in the public domain. There were 50-odd petitioners. They were given 5 copies, saying that the Honourable Attorney General's department does not have enough resources to make copies available to all the parties that are in court. And we had to scan it using cam scanner and share it amongst ourselves. So this can't be the way in which a law that will have a significant impact in relation to, I would say, all the fundamental rights that are guaranteed in our Constitution are affected.
And all media, not just new media.
No, it's all media.
Everybody, you guys.
The issue is not just limited to digital arena. The issue is also to print and the regular terrestrial broadcasters, to everything. But the issue is, how can they place one thing in the order paper and table it in Parliament and then come to the Supreme Court and say, okay, we are going to tinker with it.
So, but we still don't have the bill that will be published or tabled in Parliament on the 23rd of January in totality.
The second reading.
No, so what happens is, in terms of our law, the Constitution, this is the document that is still available. The Supreme Court looked at it and said, subject to the Attorney General's amendments, 30 plus clauses require 2/3 majority.
31.
31 clauses. And you need to subtract the clause 25 or whatever that the Attorney General said that they are not proceeding with. That is because it was obviously in violation of the Constitution.
50.
So what we must understand is,
More than half.
this is the bill that is still being going into the second reading. Now, what the Attorney General says is that the Parliament in its committee stage, the second reading, they will make these changes. What's the point? If they are going to make...
that's going to be on the verge of
it becoming law. And once it becomes law...
It's law.
It's law. The public can't challenge it for constitutionality.
So the real bill, I would say this one is a fake bill now. The real bill has not been seen.
I wouldn't call it a
bill. Well, this is a fake because the Attorney General said this is not it. It's going to be changed. This is you know, something which
well,
was thrown out there, and then the Attorney General says that's not it. We're bringing a new one. But less than a week to go. None of us have seen it. Nobody we know has seen it. What's going on? It's a secret bill.
And what's worse is, the Supreme Court says 30 plus clauses out of 50 odd. And those are the operative clauses of this bill. All of them violate the law. All of them violate the Constitution. But the Supreme Court says if you make certain changes, the violation will cease.
So it seems to me that the government has perfected the art of hoodwinking the Constitution and the Supreme Court and the people and bringing in laws without virtually anyone having a say or even having a look at it properly.
I would say that this is not the first time that has happened. But yeah, that's effectively what's happening. And this is such an important piece of legislation. In my opinion, it's probably the first piece of legislation that had come about which has a direct impact on all the fundamental rights that are set out in our Constitution. It has an absolute direct impact on freedom of thought and conscience in Article 10. It has penal sanctions which has an effect on torture, cruel, inhuman, degrading treatment and punishment, equality, arrest, the Bill of Rights in Article 14. All of it is violated, I would say.
Right. So, Salih, just reading the conclusion of the Supreme Court determination, it says if clauses 3579 mentions a few clauses and says are required to be passed in Parliament by a special majority as required by Article 84(2) of the Constitution. Does that necessarily mean that even these amendments can go ahead with a two-thirds majority in Parliament, which the government can command right now?
Oh, but I don't think the government commands a two-thirds majority.
Not yet, but yeah, 134 votes.
Yes.
You need 150.
But you have to read it with the second part. It says, however, if clauses are amended at the committee stage subject to the determination, the bill may be passed in Parliament by a simple majority. So what effectively happens is once those changes are done, then the bill could be passed with a simple majority. And the process is at the committee stage, amendments will be brought. And the Attorney General will certify that those amendments are in accordance with the determination.
So
and it could be
Attorney General certifies. How does that happen?
When a bill is presented in Parliament, the representative of the Attorney General is in attendance.
Okay.
So then they will look at the clauses which are being amended and then say if it is in line with the Supreme Court, it will be informed.
So if it's not, what can we do about it?
Then nothing we can do because then
isn't that a contempt of court?
No, then it has passed that stage because then it is a process of Parliament, and so if we have had that happening before, where something is slipped in.
A reference to recent amendments that came about as well.
Yes, also for instance, how the Provincial Council bill that was during the previous Parliament, the Provincial Council bill elections were totally done away with because a committee stage amendment was smuggled in, and that changed the whole nature.
How unfair is that?
Absolutely unfair. But
Needs to change.
Yes, and of course it was challenged in the Supreme Court, but in a divided decision 2-1, the Supreme Court did not accept that challenge. So it is unfair. But that is all the more reason why when we are talking of this type of laws, there must be a proper consultative process.
Why isn't such bills, Salia, brought in as a white paper where they can get the people engaged and get the media engaged? Because at the end of the day, the media is a stakeholder.
You just gave the answer.
Yes. So I think the probable reason is that these laws are being introduced in a hurry. So this is why I come back to what I said earlier, that this is with an anti-democratic agenda, that to advance the anti-democratic agenda of certain people, these laws are being rushed through. I would not be surprised in the next few weeks, next few months, if the Broadcasting Authority Bill also suddenly is brought in, or they'll call it a Broadcasting Commission Bill, and then that is also passed.
So certain complex bills. You see, the problem was that there was something called the Education White Paper that some people may remember, which led to all kinds of unrest and so on. So after that, the Sri Lankan political system doesn't do white papers from the 1980s. But people are doing workarounds on highly technical piece of legislation. Data protection, for example. When I was in the ICTA, we had 7 public consultations. We put the document out. We got input from industry. We got input from people interested in, this was about personal information. We got all kinds of input, and it was changed. And it was a better law as a result. We didn't call it a white paper, but it had that. It was like a white paper. Yeah. Right now, the cybersecurity bill has been open for comments, and people have been giving comments, right? So there is that provision, so there is that possibility. I think we really need to go back to that model of getting the white papers back. I can remember, you see, the issue is that this problem came up in 2019, after the Easter Sunday bombings. And I was before the Oversight Committee, Sectoral Oversight Committee on National Security, where this matter was being taken up. And I kept pleading with the chair. I was saying, okay, this is a complex subject. If you don't accept what I'm saying about the technological problems, I'll bring these guys. There are no official sitting representatives of Google, etc. I said, I'll bring them. I was chair of the ICT agency at the time. I said, I'll bring these guys. I'll make sure they're here, like in India, like in Singapore, that you conduct a proper hearing, learn from them, ask them questions, challenge them, get some nice FaceTime on TV, do the full song and dance, but at least make an informed decision. For some reason, our parliamentarians didn't want to do that. When the opportunity was there, I had talked to the people in Singapore and they were willing to come. They weren't willing to do it. Now, if that had been done, we would have a foundation. Singapore, you're talking about the Singapore legislation. You should see the results of that hearing, what they had in Parliament. It's like 200, 500 pages, huge document, which really lays out the issues, identifies the issues. I don't agree with the legislation that resulted, but I can't fault it for the process that it went through.
So, Tisha, you spoke about certain clauses of the bill itself. I want to drag your attention to 5.1. It says in the original bill, subject to the provisions of Section 6, the Commission shall consist of 5 members appointed by the President having qualifications and experience in one or more of the fields. However, this has been amended to the Commission shall consist of 5 members appointed by the President subject to the approval of the Constitutional Council from among the persons having qualifications and experience and so on and so forth. So this seems to be progressive now, isn't it? In the eyes of the government, at least. I am not for it, but at least in the eyes of the government, they could come and say, playing the devil's advocate, that 31 amendments, the AG's department has said that they will amend, and that's how the Supreme Court has given its determination on the bill in question. So we are being progressive.
Shami, just to add one thing to what you just said, this government tried to argue that the Constitutional Council should be under the President just a few weeks ago. So it doesn't respect the Constitutional Council either.
So you see, my fundamental issue is irrespective of who appoints this commission, their job is essentially being a competent authority, deciding what is true and what is not.
That's right.
So instead of the president appointing the 5 or 7 people who decide what is the truth, we have 5 or 7 people who have been appointed by the president on the recommendation of 10 other individuals. Right?
But we expect the Constitutional Council to be independent.
Of
right?
course.
Yeah.
But we also know that there is bartering that happens, and which could result with persons who are appointed to the Constitutional Council, persons who are appointed to this commission could still not determine between what is black and white, but goes on to decide what is true and untrue.
Yeah, but isn't the fundamental problem, should there be some commission
deciding on it.
truth?
So my fundamental issue with this bill is there is a bunch of people who are not trained judges, who are not basing themselves on evidence at a proper hearing, deciding what is true and what is not true. And that is the underlying issue in this entire bill. I say that it is a judicial function.
Yep.
To decide what is true or not is a judicial function which should happen in a process. Here there's a bunch of people who will decide, somebody goes and complains, for example, let's say Rohan goes and complains. And then there is a X amount of time given to me to respond to it. Or the commission can decide that what I have said is untrue and give me 24 hours to remove it.
But earlier, you would not have been even given that opportunity. Until the amendments came, it could have been one-sided.
One-sided. Rohan goes and complains, commission says, yes, that is untrue.
No, but the amendment has now come in.
Yes, but the amendment came in at the time it was challenged before the Supreme Court.
So that is why you have 14 days to challenge the petition or the bill in question.
Of course, but the amendment came at a stage when the bill was... So
but Tisha, don't you agree ultimately the bill that is going to go to the second reading committee stage debates is going to be the bill that has been amended?
Right. So let's take the bill.
And don't you think that is progressive?
Well, it's progressive from the ground about maybe 6 inches, but not progressive in terms of democracy. Mm-hmm. Right? Because at the end of the day, a bunch of people are going to sit and decide what is true and not.
No, because
now let's take an example. During COVID, there was a time when all COVID-infected deaths had to be cremated. And the scientists were divided. I'm just giving a very classic example. At one point, there were people who went and challenged it before the Supreme Court also. Unsuccessful. But there were people who were still lobbying for it. There were people who were arrested for lobbying for it. Few months down the line, the government itself changed the regulation to permit people to be buried if they die of COVID. Now what happens to the people who got arrested and punished for challenging it? What they said would have been true. Now if I always joke about it, Galileo, he was punished for saying something which he believed was true. But ultimately, now we know that what he said is true. So similarly, the commission could one day turn around and say, oh, we are sorry, we made a mistake.
So Salia, the problem is, do we need an online safety bill in Sri Lanka?
Yeah, I think there are certain concerns relating to online usage. So we say, for instance, relating to protection of children. There are concerns, so we must address those concerns. But this bill, this is under the guise of protecting the very wording online safety. It tries to give an impression to the public that it is to protect children, women, people from being harassed, so on. But the true motive for this bill is not that. So most certainly this bill is not needed. Through a wider consultation process, if we can agree on what are the provisions which should be there to actually ensure online safety, then I think that is fine. But having a bill, we still don't know who the committee members are. So there was a right to information application, and then the I think the Ministry of Public Security released certain names of people on the committee.
Most of them.
Some of them lawyers.
no.
Then some of them are very eminent lawyers. Then they came out and said, no, we were not on this committee. So now who prepared this bill?
And what is the truth right there?
Yes.
If you know, the ministry was lying.
Yes, that's right.
And that wasn't online. So.
Let's take one example of today we are discussing about this immunoglobulin issue. Now, if someone says there are various allegations made against prominent politicians, now with this bill coming in, you will find a prominent politician will go to this so-called commission and say, look, this is a false statement. Stop people from saying anything against me.
Yeah, there's precedent for this. So in the Malaysian bill, when it was debated in their legislature, somebody said, what is the truth? And the minister said, on the one MDB scandal, he said, we have said that there's no theft of money. That means that anybody who says there's been a theft, that is a falsehood, and it can't be stated. There you go.
So if I may add just one thing with regard to the bill, one of the offences is in relation to the penal code also. So commission of certain acts that are set out in the penal code, if you commit it or aid and abet the commission of any of those offences, it's an offence under the Online Safety Act also, the bill also. One of the sections is rape. Now, can somebody please tell me how you commit rape, not aiding and abetting, commit rape over the internet? But that's part of this law. So how much of thought had actually gone into it? I brought this up because Mr. Piris mentioned protection of women and children. Now, if you want to protect women and children from harmful content or somebody sharing intimate photographs or something, that shouldn't be bundled up with this particular bill, which is termed as safety. That gives a false sense of comfort.
Revenge porn has already been punished. There was some guy in Mahiyangana who was punished.
Of course.
So why do we need it?
No, so the government's argument is that you need to have specific laws. Let's take that at its face value. Fine. They first tried to include it into the proposed obscene publications. And we all went up in arms and said, somebody's intimate photographs are not obscene. You can't bundle it up in obscene publications. And then they dropped that. Now it had been brought into the online safety. This is not an online safety issue. It has to be a separate law, probably called Sexual Offences, Miscellaneous Offences Act or something, and bundle them up there.
No, but
what they do is they take a bad law, which is regressive and which is anti-democratic, and put some of these laws, sneak them in, and say, hang on, all those people who are talking about this law as being bad, they are avoiding those progressive things. So you cover a poison pill with some sugar coating and then they try to feed it to us.
So Salia, you were actively involved in the Aragalaya at that time because you were the president of the Bar Association of Sri Lanka at that time. And how would things be different if you look at that context at that time and after the bill has been tabled in Parliament and enacted as a law? Can you give us an example to elaborate that?
So one would be, so for instance, we know that there is ongoing Supreme Court fundamental rights case also of Anuruddha Bandara, who was arrested. Now he was arrested basically for coining the phrase "go home" and spreading that messages were all peaceful. But he was arrested by the police, produced before the magistrate on charges of under section 120 of the Penal Code. And he was of course granted bail. A few weeks later, the magistrate, one of the Colombo additional magistrates decided there was no offence, and he simply discharged him. Now, the risk here is, you will find, that is one problem with in our system. Even if there is no offence, you will find this so-called commission harassing people. They will be summoned before the commission. Commission will issue directives. So ultimately, after a process, they might go free, but the people will not want to be harassed. So then, what would happen is, certain people might say, we will opt not to talk. Why should we be hauled up before these various commissions, and why should we face all that? We better keep quiet. So the danger of that, we saw the 2022 March to July, the people expressed what they really felt, and in the face of obviously economic mismanagement, and which now the Supreme Court has confirmed. So take that example. If this bill was there in 2022 March, if you said the government mismanaged the economy, or X, Y, and Z mismanaged the economy, X, Y, and Z would have taken these people to task before the commission and said, you're false, we have not mismanaged the economy. And you would find a pliant commission finding that indeed that is false. And those people who said so and so, these people mismanaged the economy, would have been hauled up and punished for.
Now, earlier,
yes.
If there's going to be a commission which determines what is true and what is not, what happens to religion? Because the different religions, there are of course certain commonalities, but there are a lot of differences. So if a person goes and makes a complaint against whichever church, is the commission going to decide?
And this is the problem. You will find some. This is where these people, although now we say they are going to be appointed through the Constitutional Council process. If we know that some of the commissions, even through the Constitutional Council process, some of the appointments have not been great. So you will find a bunch of people, and we know many of these commissions have been are subject to pressure, are subject to political pressures. We know how the executive has tried to bulldoze certain commissions.
And we've seen this happening in the past.
Yeah, and we saw the executive president trying to bulldoze the Constitutional Council. So in that situation, you will find this sort of commission being forced to, especially on what will happen is they will selectively choose certain things. It will not be each and every thing, but they will selectively take matters and go against people who dissent.
Quite a lot of the sections have to do with religion, because you see our fundamental right to expression is a qualified right. Right? It says for religious harmony, etc., you can infringe it. It specifically says
can restrict it.
Restrict it. So if you look at, for example, section 15 causes a disturbance to any assembly lawfully engaged in the performance of religious worship. Then section 16, which was deleted, wounding the religious feelings of a person. Section 17, outraging the religious feelings of any class of persons. Vague offences.
Exactly.
These are the ones that could be used against somebody. So the issue really is, you see, it's a two-step process, right? So the first step is the message originator will be given a stop order, which says take it down. And that probably will not happen, because if it's truly malicious, that person won't be stupid enough to be here. That person will be somewhere else, yeah? So they won't do anything. Then you go to the ISP, the internet service provider, or the platform company, and says take it down. Now earlier, the commission could directly tell the platform company or the ISP. Now with the amendments, they have to go to a magistrate and then tell those companies to take it down, right? So that's where they're saying, look, you're telling us to take it down in 24 hours. If the lawful authority tells us to do something, we will do it. But you can't tell us to do it in 24 hours, right? So now what will happen is that they will tune their algorithms in a way that many of these messages simply will not appear. Because they don't want to be bothered. They don't have the staff, they don't want the hassle. And then the penalties are quite heavy for them. They'll just tune it so that most of what we put in will either not appear or we will be suspended even before we get going. You know, even now people are suspended. People are warned, etc. Even I get warnings sometimes, right? So being extremely careful person, right? All this will happen. So there will be extreme, and there's evidence if anybody wants to look. The first of these restrictive laws came in Germany, and there was extraordinary amount of takedowns that happened. It was like overzealous censorship. Now, what we will do, as somebody said, we will say, I mean, I don't want this grief. I don't want to be suspended from whatever social media platform that I'm active in. So I will have to self-censor. My argument is that this vagueness and all this terrible language is not, I mean, you could explain it in terms of incompetence. I'm not ruling out incompetence and stupidity. That should never be ruled out in Sri Lankan legal and political matters. But there's a possibility that this vagueness is there for a reason. It's simply so we don't know what is permitted and what is not. And we will just engage in self-censorship. That's the deal.
But what's unfortunate is that the special determination does not address that. That the law is very vague, and because there's sufficient authority to show that when the law is vague, it must be struck down.
Yeah.
So, and the Supreme Court over and over in the past had said
But
so.
that doesn't happen
But
in this.
unfortunately, for some reason, although many of us made that submission in the Supreme Court, that aspect is not addressed.
Rohantha, what is your take with regard to what must the corporate sector in Sri Lanka do? Because that was one of the allegations leveled by Salia in his opening remarks as well. The corporate sector in Sri Lanka is silent on many issues, not only on the online safety bill. I can mention a number of issues where the corporate sector in Sri Lanka has been silent. Where is the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce? Where is the export associations? Where are the chambers who have to be outspoken at this point of time? Why aren't they doing it? So that's a different story altogether, and we'll park that at the moment. But with regard to the online safety bill, where are these chambers? See, Google comes from outside. On 7th of January, they issue a statement. On the 2nd of October, they come from outside, they issue a statement. Where are the chambers? What are they doing?
See, somewhere there are two sides to this. One is where you could be a barometer for the society. The second is you can see as to how you're going to protect your company and make sure that people's livelihood is given.
That's the role of the chamber.
The livelihood is given. Now, for example,
but is it the role of the chamber?
I agree with what you're saying. It has been a perennial thing that has been challenged every 5 years whenever you have a new chamber head. But the issue is that nobody has looked at tourism. Now, we know that most of the tourists who come on reviews.
I'll tell you, Rohan. You know what the reason is? When you have special interest groups appointed to these positions, that is how they become silent, not because of anything else.
See, that is one. Second, more importantly, Samir, it's to do with where, right now your business is absolutely challenged. Even the companies that were doing well in 2003 is really challenged the first quarter. And now you have a situation where if you take the tourism industry, how do you run on reviews of people, that industry. If you take a TripAdvisor, you take any of the platforms. Now, who is going to modulate this if there is any kind of hatred that has been written on religion? Now, if these guys pull out, what's going to happen to that industry? So I think the government needs to ask themselves, where are they driving the country on? Is it on economic growth agenda? Is it about trying to stay in power?
No, but why a reactive approach, Rohantha? Why a reactive approach from the corporate sector in Sri Lanka? Why not a proactive approach?
Or is it that the corporate sector of Sri Lanka simply has no clout with this government anymore?
Well, it could be one. Second is, of course, that they have voiced their concern so much, and if people are not listening to what is being said, how do you go forward? For example, if you take the export strategy.
I'll interrupt you there for a second. I'll ask Sali this question. Sali, what do you do when you say things and it goes on deaf ears?
No, I think you have to go public. Firstly, so for instance, we know during the economic crisis, how did the corporate sector react? Up to 2021 December, the corporate sector, the key corporates did not want to go public. Didn't they know that there was an economic crisis coming? They jolly well knew.
Yeah.
But they didn't, because they did not want to antagonize the powers that be. Now, this is the same process they are adopting now. In respect of democracy, in respect of elections, we have not seen the top corporates speaking out.
And I was speaking out.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I say this because we knew during the Aragalaya, by May, they changed. They went to the other extreme. Even saying the president must go immediately.
I was really surprised.
Yes. But that is because then when they sense the mood of the people, they changed.
Sali, you're absolutely correct. You know why, Sali? In 2021, December, when we want to get the chambers to speak about the country's economic crisis, they didn't do so up until January 3rd week.
Yeah. I say this because on January 12th, the Bar Association, January 12, 2022, the Bar Association issued a statement on the economy. And when we issued a statement on the economy, none of the chambers had not spoken of. I say this because I think they have a moral responsibility to ensure the to safeguard democracy in this country.
Because the private sector is at the end of the day, the engine of growth in the country.
And what does the Asia Internet Coalition want? They are saying this will hamper Sri Lanka, the digital economy. So surely, at least should not the chambers now open their mouths and let their views be known? Their silence is deafening.
Where is SLASCOM? Where is Ceylon Chamber of Commerce? What's happening to these guys?
See, SLASCOM has not even been consulted.
So they must
They have to come in the open and talk about
Rohan,
it.
neither were we, but we certainly make our views
Yeah, I
known.
mean, it's like this. I mean, they have apparently given their submissions, but then they are part of large conglomerates, so they are also part of the wheel. So it's a moral justice. You're right.
Gone are the days, Rohanta, you play this game where you have to look after your corporate, and then you don't sit on those boards. You withdraw completely. You talk about, if you're interested about the public, you have to come and talk about these problems.
And it will come.
When?
Now, once
After the 23rd of January, please don't.
But they will
The
do
chambers
that.
not even talk about it after the 23rd of January, because it's going to be a part of the law in the country.
And what will happen if this bill is passed and some of these people pull out of this country and the economy suffers, then by then it will be too late for these corporates
It's the difference
to...
between corporate Sri Lanka and corporate India, Samir. Corporate India, Ratan Tata comes on board day number 1 and says what he does to do, because then he's above board. But then, you have certain challenges in the corporate sector. You're in the corporate sector, that people don't like to come on. It's a very sad situation, and you have a few rightist people who will come on board and maybe even decide to come for a forum like this. Some wouldn't, even if you invite them, they don't come. You don't even see them in the papers.
No, but that, Rohanta, is sad. That is sad. Because being a country that has gone through a change for years, you saw the manner in which in 2015 there was a good governance government, nothing happened. 2019 we saw Gotabaya Rajapaksa coming into play, and then we saw the Aragalaya happening, nothing happened. And we are still talking about taking a proactive approach for all these matters. It's sad, isn't it?
Yep. I mean, the other day Rohan was there. We were discussing about the different options in which you are going to negotiate with the creditors. As soon as the group discussions happen, people just walked away. So they don't want to comment. So it's sad.
Rohanta, why I'm saying why a reactive approach always? I'll tell you about this VAT matter that came into the limelight from the 1st of January, which was increased to 18%. This is going to affect the tea industry as well. Yeah. You won't believe, until the first trading at the Colombo tea auction, they were still talking about getting the companies registered for SVAT.
Yeah. And they had to move away the auction also.
What is this? Where is the chamber? Where is the tea board? Where is the competent authorities who are talking about change in this country? Everyone is taking a reactive approach. You go to the Inland Revenue Department, the Inland Revenue Commissioner has gone on leave. So no one is there to sign the papers. Why so much of bureaucracy? That's the problem. That is where this country has failed.
I mean, you take the papers, you see how many hotels are put on sale because they can't pay their loan. But nobody is talking about it.
Would you be interested in knowing what the AIC said about the digital economy?
Yes, sir. Professor.
The proposed legislation in its present form poses significant challenges that, if not addressed comprehensively, could undermine the potential growth of Sri Lanka's digital economy.
Yeah.
Diplomatic, but clearly stated. The economic implications of the proposed online safety bill cannot be overstated. Sri Lanka's digital ecosystem stands at the precipice of substantial growth, and it is essential to foster an environment that encourages innovation and investment. The concerns raised in our submission with regard to criminal liabilities, safe harbor provisions, turnaround times, user data access, and other critical aspects of the bill underscore the urgency of reconsidering the current draft. You know, I mean, most people can understand what is being said here.
So we have a question, Rohanda, for you from one of our viewers. The Asia Internet Coalition has called for extensive revision to the online safety bill. Has the government thought about the impact this will have on tourism? What if sites such as Booking.com, TripAdvisor, Expedia and Agoda decide to pull out?
I mean, it is an issue, Samir, and it has not been addressed. And it's very sad that the private sector the agenda is slightly different. It's sad, but then the question is, that's a reality. And it's great that you guys are at least having this discussion with people to keep this alive among people's thoughts. Otherwise, you know, this would have just faded away. Because you have, I mean, just imagine the revisions that have happened. Nobody is even aware about. So, I think the government is in very, very catch-22 situation. And
so Salih, usually when you speak about a UNP-led government, like when you speak about the UNP's mentality, the ideologies, it has always been on democracy, protecting the people, protecting the business community. It has always been the case. When you speak to businessmen, they always say they prefer to have a UNP government in power because they help businesses to thrive. What is happening now?
But is there a UNP government in power?
I would love to answer that question.
I have my reservations about the UNP's contribution to democracy. When you look at from the 80s. But having said that, I think this is what this bill will do to the digital economy is what President Gotabaya Rajapaksa's decision on fertilizer into agriculture. So
that bad?
I think it could be that bad.
See, the issue is there is a very well accepted principle called intermediary liability exemption, right? Now the thing is, you see this intermediary, these guys are specifically saying you're not dealing with the intermediary liability issue adequately, right? You're saying you're just lumping everything, search engines, content sharing platforms, you're just lumping everything. They are specifically in black and white saying you're not making the necessary distinctions. Because you see, it's really surprising. I mean, when I was researching the intermediary liability issue, Section 230 in the US Online Decency Act, I found that there was some case of people sharing accommodation. So there had been some statement made in that which said, I don't want people of, I don't want blacks or gays or whatever sharing the same house with me. That was in violation with the California law. And the sharing platform, now we are not talking about the guy who made the comment. The platform got nailed, right? That was the case. And because of the existence of Section 230, the platform was able to get out. Now, what these people are saying, you're not addressing the problem of intermediary liability adequately. So this is a question. Now, I won't go as far as saying, a tourist saying, this is a rubbish hotel, their food is bad, I had diarrhea or something like that, can be prosecuted under this. There is no section under which that can be, even if it's false, it can be prohibited, right? But if it can be interpreted as causing ill will between classes, I mean, what the hell is ill will between classes, right? How do we define that?
Groups of people.
Groups of people, right? How do we define that? If it's causing religious, whatever, feelings to be hurt, right? Tourists. It's on some kind of tourist site, some comment, right? I liked it, except there were too many people of X persuasion. Could happen. That's your impact on tourism.
And the danger there is what we must understand how the law is applied. So the classic case of this Sirasa, the Supreme Court delivered a judgment in November last year. He had a post where he spoke about an ideological war against extremism, calling it keyboard jihad. What did the CID go and do? They arrested him. Why? They saw the word jihad. And then the OIC of the CID, they arrested him, produced him under the ICCPR. And he was in remand for months. And ultimately now, several years later, the Supreme Court has given a very progressive judgment, and those officers were made to pay. So here also what would happen? Some officer takes a thing out of context and says this is causing ill will, and tries to move against a citizen.
So, Salia, do you think all this is happening because the government is trying to suppress the people, suppress the media ahead of an important election, maybe a general election or maybe a presidential election, that is going to happen this year?
I'm not too sure whether this bill is targeting only an election, but it is. I think it is something of a more longer term approach, where there are people who think that all these problems are being caused by social media, and they think we are being criticized, we are subject to, we are becoming unpopular because of the social media. So we must suppress that sort of dissent.
I've had interactions with people from all political parties. I'm talking about previous parliament as the current parliament. And I can honestly tell you, I really had people, I found more people saying, "Monari karando make it." Something must be done because these people are trashing us.
Yeah. And they go on record saying, "Minisu apita niwan suwa kiyanawa." ඒක නිසා
these people are
මේ
trashing
නීතිය
us. Something must be done. Something must be done. And generally speaking, in Sri Lanka, something must be done. I'm saying you want something must be done. We'll work out a technological solution. We'll work out codes of conduct. The something must be done does not have to be a law that puts people in jail and fines them. It should not be punishment centric, right? I go back to that example that I used, which is one of the most atrocious things, the live streaming of some massacre or something. I mean, what's the point of punishing that fellow? He's going to be dead by the time the game is over, right? The point is to prevent the harm that he's causing through the live streaming, not to punish him. So that's why this whole thing is misguided. It's on some punishment model, right? The only way I can think of it is it's on a punishment model and it's based on vague terminology, which means that, well, we will be ultra careful. Now the fellow who's really malicious, who really wants to do something bad online, he doesn't care, right? He'll do a workaround from outside the country or with pseudonyms or something like that. He will go. I mean, this is the same argument when I think Jayalalitha was talking about, immigration restrictions and so on. I think, yes, the External Affairs Minister had said, Prabharan and his terrorists are not going to take visas to come to Tamil Nadu. I mean, they want to come, they'll come, right? They're not going to come through the relaxed procedures,
yes,
right? So that's what's going to happen. The real criminals will still be able to do that thing. This is a completely misguided piece of legislation because of that.
This is your thoughts, yeah.
And I think one of the other important aspects that we must keep in mind is, before the technological advancements, false statements, misstatements or whatever by politicians, the feedback loop was very long. You say something today, it will get published 2 days later in the newspaper. And the general public can't really react to it. Now a politician gets up and says something stupid or wrong, 5 minutes later the general public has turned him into a meme.
But when they say it in parliament, that's even worse.
Yeah, so now they have more of a requirement that people who make fun of them, people who criticize them, are silenced quickly. That's why the deterrent is important for them. Their interest is not really taking it down. Their interest is to ensure that the smallest fly is swatted.
Just like the Yuktiya program.
They won't dare go behind somebody big. They'll start with somebody small. Mr. Piris spoke of Anuruddha. There's this other guy, Chirantamara Singh. He first, in 2020, on the first anniversary of the president's assumption, said, turn off your TV and put Gota fail flat as a hashtag. That's all he said. Next morning he was arrested.
Hey, he said it on Facebook.
He was charged under Section 120, obviously given bail. The Supreme Court immediately granted bail. Now, he's the same guy who said that people who are Christians who die of COVID must be given the right to be buried. For those two reasons, he was arrested. That's simply because the feedback loop is very quick.
So let's say, Tisha, that these big tech giants like Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram, so on and so forth, they fail to comply with this. They say we won't comply with these regulations. We're not going to do it because we are too big. We are only 22 million people. We don't care about Sri Lanka. We won't do it. What happens then?
So the only thing I can think of is what happened in 2019 and when the Digana riots happened. The government would probably give an illegal directive to the TRC to shut down those websites' access. That's about it. And what will we do? Download a VPN. And I mean, in 2019, while Facebook was officially turned off in Sri Lanka, the acting Minister of Defense went online on Facebook and posted. I remember sharing that, saying, what's the minister doing on Facebook like us? So he also joined Facebook using a VPN. And he is expecting the rest of us to do it.
But the danger there is some of those companies might think it's not worth the hassle.
Yeah.
That they might not they might not want a Sri Lankan court issuing
and it really
process
isn't
against them.
for a company which has hundreds of millions.
Yeah, for them, Sri Lanka,
billions
the Sri Lankan market is meager. They will just
like what happened in Pakistan, they might say, sorry, we'll just pull out. You create your law, we'll just pull out.
Yeah.
And I think that has happened now. For instance, in certain countries, Facebook doesn't have news.
Canada.
Because there were certain restrictions brought.
Even YouTube news segments don't work in Canada.
Yeah.
Yes. So I think we must be careful. So the problem is, I think who is going to suffer? It is not those, not Google or YouTube, but it will be those who our digital economy, which is going to suffer.
And it's also a commercial decision, isn't it? Because it's not just the number of users, it is how much revenue that country is bringing to that particular platform.
And it's also SMEs, small, medium enterprises.
So usually, Salia, I have noticed when there's matters like this, you see very quickly the US government, the UK government, the Western world start criticizing. We see this. We've seen this in the past, especially during the Hapalne government. We've seen things of this sort happening very quickly. This time we don't.
But didn't you
I think
see
there was
a
a
comment
call,
from,
the US ambassador.
I would say, an undiplomatic comment from the minister, where he says a certain
Lady.
diplomat from a certain country, a lady, called me and asked me to withdraw this thing, and I won't do it.
Right.
Now, I mean, I think everybody can figure out who the lady was, right?
I
It
can't
was
figure out,
intended to signal, point to a particular person, right?
But we have seen this arrogance. No? We see now we see a particular minister saying, even if the UN says we won't stop. But we have seen how where has this country got to through that sort of arrogance. Relating to the UN Human Rights Council also, trying to say that we will not take any notice of the
Now,
UN.
my understanding from many interactions I've been having with these people, I mean, I've had interactions with the minister as well, is that there's a lot of pressure. I mean, the thing is, you see, you guys sort of want public statements, and you want getting out of here, you know, hammer, the sledgehammer approach. What you're getting is a very diplomatic, low-key, but there is pressure, right, from the UN system. UN system has spoken up, right? The rapporteurs have spoken. Particular missions have spoken. So it's there. The question is, I don't understand, given this pressure, why the minister is still proceeding with this ill-conceived law. I mean, there's really no reason. He doesn't get any points for this.
6 days from now, it's going to be tabled in Parliament.
And the question is, you know, I mean, this kind of law, shouldn't it come from the Minister of Justice? Why is it coming
Or the
from...
Minister of Media, maybe.
Why is it coming from the public security place? I mean, what is that about?
So that is also another question we do
Maybe
not know.
other people thought it was a hot potato and they didn't want it. And
Well,
then
that would be the ministry which over the last month locked up, I think, nearly 30,000 of our fellow citizens, at least for one night, and then released most of them after that. So this has caused shockwaves around the world, although we ourselves don't, we just tot up the numbers. It's another 1,000 tonight. So yeah, it's a strange ministry, certainly. But let me ask Rohantha. Now, Sri Lankans get much of their humor from the internet. Our humor has it's a not so subtle shift. We see these memes and cartoons and jokes and everything on the internet, and we laugh. We forward those things, we put it on WhatsApp groups, and we laugh. But we could get locked up for doing just that under this particular law, if it becomes a law. Are we seeing a suppression of humor, of laughter?
Well, I'm not sure where the suppression comes. All I know is that people look at the parliament and they don't watch any movies anymore.
Comedies, you mean? Or tragedies?
Even the movies, I mean,
Tragicomedy.
if you look at the share of voice ratings, the ratings are highest when it comes to parliamentary sessions right now, not the movies.
No, but the point is, Rohantha, is ultimately how is this going to impact a country that is talking about a digitized economy right now? Because we're talking about how tourists should be attracted. We go and spend millions of money to get someone like Nas Daily to do campaigns, so on and so forth. So this is going to have a ripple effect overall, isn't it?
Yeah, it's going to have a huge impact. And I think the government is not even understanding the impact that they can have. In my view, they wouldn't do this because we know that even after we got about 1.5 million tourists, the revenue that we have earned is only 2 billion because we are getting either the budget tourists or we are getting the top end. We are not getting the middle. So we know that the global campaign has to hit out. You know, we know that the traction is going to come through digital, and here is it that we are going and suppressing the share of voice. So I think the government needs to ask, where is their growth drivers? Is it only by taxes, or is it by economic development by looking at exports, which also needs reviews, as well as tourism? and that kind of, they say, no, the brand is built by people, not by sexy advertising.
Well,
So
but
people-
taxation is not a growth driver, it
is
kills growth.
Absolutely.
I was thinking of your humor question, and one of the things that has been bothering me from the beginning of this was that I am actually a fan of news curry, right? I like that. Yeah, I don't know whether you guys are aware. So I say now, I mean, what if somebody finds news curry offensive, right? This is anonymous. It's coming with, there's no human being named. So clauses 28 and 29 are very dangerous actually in that regard. The Commission can compel the intermediaries to disclose the identities of the uploader if unknown. Police may seek access to subscriber information, computer systems, traffic data, communications, etc. as part of their investigations of these offences. So these guys are basically saying, you will be telling us to violate laws in multiple jurisdictions which we don't want to do, and you will also tell us to basically break the encryption on some of our systems like WhatsApp, right?
Yeah.
You got to break it.
Yeah.
So because somebody is offended by news curry, by a joke there, what's going to happen?
But then our CID would have to raid Zuckerberg's house and Elon Musk's house, I presume, in order to...
So you'll have court orders that will say, okay, we can't do it. I mean, it's not worth the trouble to do it. We have done it when California wanted us to break encryption, we didn't do it. Microsoft was under daily penalty and they didn't do it. So they'll say, okay, then I guess what we'll have to do is to leave. There'll be no more WhatsApp.
That point, yeah, and to come to that point.
No more WhatsApp for Sri Lanka.
And we'll come to that point pretty fast.
Yeah.
So WhatsApp is heavily used by companies, by whether it's a corner shop or a massive conglomerate. WhatsApp is used. There are, of course, other platforms as well.
But we all use WhatsApp for our day-to-day.
I'm sure the Bar Association has many WhatsApp groups. So
My problem is too many.
One group.
No, but the danger is, Professor Ram, when you're saying that WhatsApp will decide to leave, what is our global connectivity?
Yeah.
Where is Sri Lanka going to be, a frog in the wheel again?
You see, China broke global connectivity, but they had WeChat. They had their solutions, and they had 10,000 internet police who were watching these things. They had the system and they broke it when they broke the links. Now we are going to break the links with nothing. That's the problem.
Yeah, China is big, Professor, you know, and you can make money for that.
Yeah.
billion of
I mean,
people.
I'm not
Sri Lanka is
endorsing
going
the
to-
solution. I'm just saying it's really stupid, but what to do?
So I want to quickly ask our four panelists this evening, what is the way forward? We spoke about a little bit about the white paper concept, how it could be brought back to light. I agree with Saleh when he said about the UNP has been very undemocratic. In the 1980s, we saw the 83 riots, the 87 insurrection, the way in which our food supplies were not given to the people in the north. So I stand corrected there, Saleh. I agree with you on that. But what I want to know from the four of you is, what is the way forward for Sri Lanka? Because Saleh spoke about the fact that we need a bill of this sort, but it has to be done very progressively. So let me first of all talk to Rohant and ask his thoughts about what is the way forward, Rohant? What must we do as a nation to arrest these problems and, you know, iron out all these issues that we have and bring out something better for the nation, because we're talking about an election year.
See, Samir, the first thing that we have to understand is that in the last 1 year, the country has been put on a proper path. And if you see who has done this, it's a technocrat.
Very subjective, very subjective.
Yeah, no, I'm saying it's a technocrats. You know, you allow the technocrats to run the country. They're intelligent people. They're first-class honors graduates. They're not people who are not connected. They know what's happening globally. They've gone for different global training programs. So if you allow them to take decisions, they will take correct decisions. And we saw how they were taking decisions in the last 1 year. Until the economy crashed, you didn't allow this to happen, and the politicians are tinkering it. And that's what happened. Now, even in this current situation, because the politicians are tinkering, you have this kind of output that comes out. But if you allow the public sector, the real public sector, just like in India, the IS officials, to start coming and running the country, and the politicians will go as just figureheads, we can't put this country right.
Right. Attorney at Law Tisha?
Yeah, so my view is that this needs some serious overhaul, and being passed in this manner is not going to help anybody.
So you're saying this has to be completely...
It has to be done away with. And I would say that we have to rethink, like Rohan suggested, this should not be a deterrent-based process. And even punishments have to be rethought.
Proportionate.
Being proportionate to various other aspects. But leave that aside. What are we criminalizing? Religious statements, hurting religious feelings. The definitions must be there. And there's sufficient authority in the Supreme Court with previous bills, which have said, for example, the rehabilitation bill. Supreme Court very clearly said, sorry, if you're not specific, you are only helping the wrongdoer. Because the wrongdoer will do it and get away with it. And the innocent guy who is not sure will not do anything about it. Because he's worried that he'll get caught in. So that is why penal laws must be very specific. You can't use vague sentences like hurting religious feelings and make law. Yes, there may be previous laws, past laws that are in place that have such wording. But that doesn't mean that future laws also should follow that. So I think that this whole process, like Mr. Piris also earlier pointed out, there was an RTI to find out who were these eminent members who drafted this bill. And all the senior lawyers who were there said, we were not there. You can't have a situation like that. It has to be people who are actually knowledgeable on the subject.
At least stakeholders who are involved.
Not just stakeholders. If you're getting persons involved, they must be people who are very well versed in that particular area. Yeah. So for a technical law like this, it must be the technical experts, not just lawyers that they pick and choose from their bunch of friends. It doesn't work that.
Bunch of friends?
I don't know. I'm just guessing. Because nobody really knows how this...
After the 23rd, you can't guess this year.
Yeah, well, hopefully I won't be one of those to be squatted out first. So anyhow, my point is these laws must be done right, because there's no post-enactment judicial review. You make that law. We know how difficult it is to get rid of a bad provision in the law. We all know certain provisions in the law are bad, including the parliamentarians. But we know how difficult it is to get something like that even amended. So imagine a bill like this, a bad law, the entire thing is bad, coming into place. Nobody, once it's enacted, the next government won't come and say, yes, this is bad, we will take it out. The only time that happened was when the present president was Prime Minister, he took out criminal defamation. That's the only last time I can remember there was something good that was done to prevent this sort of punishment. But now, under his term, this law is coming into place to replace what was removed. Shouldn't be that. That's what I feel.
So you're saying, hypothetically, if the president is given another term, it will be more difficult for Sri Lanka?
I don't know, but under this law, there will be a lot of people going to jail.
But
that's what my prediction is.
Shamir, that wouldn't be you and me.
Attorney at Law. This is very good. Thank you. Professor Rohan Samarjiva, Chair of Learn Asia.
I think it's always easy to say politicians should do this, politicians should do that. I think we have to begin with the general public. I think we have a cultural attitude in this country. Whenever there's a problem, people go around saying there should be a law against it. The laws don't work. The people prosecuted under these laws are not found guilty. None of these things happen. But we just go around saying there should be a law against it, right? I think we should get out of that model. What is really important to understand is that abuse, bad things have been happening to children before the technology came. Women have been harmed, Kalapatra, rumors, anonymous posters. These things have been there in society. So what we have to do is to say, yeah, all those bad things have been there. Now, what is the technologically novel element that we have now? And I pointed to that novel element. It's called viral dissemination. It's the rapidity and the pace of how it spreads, that even if the first person takes it out, it still keeps going. And the fact that it's an inherently global platform, that the people who used to put Kalapatra generally were from your village. But these Kalapatra fellows are in some other countries, right? So we have to recognize that reality. So it's a technological problem or technological aspect that is aggravating a social problem. Now, if you want to address that real problem, what you do is, as Tisha said, talk to the tech people. That's what I was trying to do. I was trying to bring the tech people to say, this is how our systems are configured. YouTube doesn't behave exactly the same as WhatsApp, doesn't behave exactly the same as TikTok. These are all different animals. So you listen to all these people, and then you figure out what they can do. So it's a technological problem, and what you need is a technological solution of rapid takedown. Now, how do you do rapid takedown? Now, there are some people, probably you and I will be on the different sides of this fence, where I'm saying, let the tech boys do it, do their thing. Let's have appeals, right? To some extent, I'm giving penal power or discretionary power to the tech people. Because I'm not giving it to people, I'm giving it to algorithms. That's the only way this thing can be done, is that you tune the algorithms in certain ways, where, for anybody, I would challenge you, even today, go find a nude image on Facebook if you can. Can't. There's things that are close, but there's no nudity on Facebook. That's been technologically prevented, deterred. So if you take the word viral dissemination, right, that's an analogy that we are using, a metaphorical use of the word viral, you take the rest of the viral. Now, what do you do about people getting infected with viruses? Do you put them in Kandakadu all the time? Is that what you do? Or do you encourage good behaviors? Tell people to wear masks, to wash their hands, if they've got a temperature, if they're sneezing, don't go out. Isn't that what you do, right? So I think we need to focus on that. It's another way of deterring.
So a quick question for you, Professor, before we switch to Salia. How will this impact our target of an artificial intelligence generation?
Oh, well, this is what?
The bill.
My solution will be, of course, we can use artificial intelligence to do what I'm talking about. Artificial intelligence is one of these buzzwords that people keep talking about. But when you're talking about training the algorithms, that's sort of what people talk about as artificial intelligence these days. What you're doing is machine learning, deep learning, and then maybe a little bit of sort of generative intelligence work, right? So, yeah, all that can be mobilized. I'm saying use the potential of the technology, rather than run around trying to come up with this 19th century laws, which cannot be implemented. How many people do you have to have in this commission for it to respond within a week, right? And the way the complaints are coming, the complaints can be given by email, the complaints can be given orally originally. You just call and say, hey, I don't like X.
No, but that has been changed.
That little word has been removed, but the rest of it is there. Now in Singapore, for example, you wanted to know, in Singapore there is a screen. Now I don't like that screen, many people might not, but it's a minister's screen. You have to go to any minister and say that is a false statement which falls under the purview of POFMA. And you generally know that the Singapore ministers are not sort of hoi polloi, right? I mean, they're sort of serious people. Now, they have to send it to the POFMA office. That's a screen. So it's a manageable number. I'm trying to find out how many people they have in the POFMA office and how many complaints they get. But it's a relatively small number. And then their judicial system, their court system works better than ours. Yes, they handle cases much faster. And there are appeals. So I've been following one case where an online journal called JOM got a POFMA order and how they went through the steps, right? They were able to appeal, they could go to the courts. The whole process, I mean, the process is decent, I would say. It's just that this whole falsehood story I don't like, right?
Right.
So we can have courts, we can have industry courts. We have an industry court that has been consulted and broadly consulted and is ready in Sri Lanka. We don't need laws. We need to work with courts. If you really don't trust industry courts, we can have some form of co-regulation, right? We can, if essential. I would say do that as second phase. Wait till the first phase, get it going with the corporation companies, get it going, see how it works, then bring in co-regulation if you want.
Right. Thanks, Professor. Salih, I'm going to pose a question to you and then you can sum up with the way forward for Sri Lanka. A Buddhist priest might preach on 4 noble truths, while a non-Buddhist with different interests may object saying, those are not true. So is the Commission going to decide on the 4 noble truths?
So I think that is going to be the problem, because various people will be calling upon the Commission to decide, whether relating to religion or any other thing, what is true or not. And I don't think anyone has a monopoly on the truth, because we know that ultimately, actually in certain things there might be several truths. Sometimes there is no one single truth. So for that reason, I think for that reason too, this bill is a bad piece of legislation. Now the way forward, as I see it, is I think this bill, you can't tinker with this anymore. I think this must be withdrawn. You have to go back to the drawing boards, have a much wider consultative process. But if this bill is to be withdrawn, the future is the people of this country, including, as I said at the beginning, those in the corporate sector, the chambers, those in the IT sector, they have to come forward and they have to have the guts to speak out and to urge the government not to go ahead with this bill. But if they don't have that courage, it is not worth 1 year later complaining that things have gone wrong and then moping over that. And that is, I think, absolutely necessary. We have only a short space of time, but I do hope that there will be, at least even at this last moment, that the sense will prevail.
Salih, if you were to advise the Minister of Justice or the Minister of Public Security on this bill in question, what would that advice be?
Withdraw it.
Withdraw it. Right. Thank you very much, Salih Peiris, President's Council. Thank you very much, Professor Rohan Samarjeeva, Chair of Learn Asia. Professor, you said something very interesting. You said there are very sensitive, serious people who are ministers in the Singapore Parliament. Sri Lankan ministers are not serious.
Well, I mean, go look up their CVs. I've talked to Shanmugam, I've talked to Tharman Dharmaratnam. I mean, these are serious players, right? And they get paid serious money too, right?
Right. Thanks a lot, Professor Rohan Samarjeeva, Chair of Learn Asia. Thank you very much, Dr. Rohan Tatukoral, Country Head, Cooltrack Software Labs, Sri Lanka, Maldives and Pakistan, Attorney at Law, Tisha Verugar. Salih, if I don't ask this question from you today, I'm not doing justice by the people. So I'm going to pose this question to you because I'm seeing you after this particular statement was made by President Ranil Wickremesinghe in Parliament. Any political ambitions, Salih? They say there is no fire without a spark. So do you want to respond to that?
No. The answer is no.
You don't want to respond to that?
No. The answer is no.
No political ambitions?
No.
So not contesting a general election, not a presidential election, even if invited?
No.
Not going to be a common candidate either.
Oh my gosh, no. I think this is in someone's head, but not in my head.
Thanks a lot, Sali. Thank you very much for joining us this evening on Face the Nation. Thank you very much, Niresh, for joining us this evening. Consultant English News Director at Newsfirst. Thank you very much for your questions on the number 07665655353. Please do send in your questions. I'm trying to filter them as much as possible because most of those comments that we get in are views and opinions. So please make sure that you send in questions so I can pose it to the panelists. So I leave you tonight with a quote, as I always do. If you believe in freedom of speech, you believe in freedom of speech for views you don't like. Take care and good night.